Welcome, everyone. We have a full house this evening. I'd like to call the May 20th regular City Council meeting to order. All of those that would like to join the council and myself this evening in the Pledge of Allegiance, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we move into our first special business item, I know a lot of you have attended this evening because of the expectation that there was going to be some transportation projects on the agenda this evening, and council will be talking about them. I'm going to let City Administrator Moon talk about the dates of the meetings where the council will be discussing, taking public comment, and voting on the transportation projects, because it's not on our agenda for this evening. City Administrator Moon?
Sure. The Capital Improvement Program, or what we refer to as the CIP, is going to be introduced at a City Council meeting on June 10th. That meeting, I would anticipate we provide a presentation that gives an overview of the Capital Improvement Plan and talk at kind of higher levels, summarizing elements of the plan. Then on June 24th, the City Council will have a second meeting to hear about the capital improvement plan and to have some conversation with each other, to deliberate, and to pose questions and get answers from staff about those capital projects. Then on July 1st, the Council will hold a public hearing on the CIP, and then we're anticipating council action on July 15th. And I'll just note that in reviewing the capital improvement plan and making some decisions about the capital improvement plan, we anticipate that'll kind of set the stage for how future capital projects will be implemented and how the council will likely attempt to secure the funding for those projects. And following the CIP discussions, we will then resume any subsequent actions we need to take with regard to the Transportation Benefit District.
Thank you. So moving on to the first item on our agenda this evening is special business, ID 0446, Community Fund Update. And tonight, the council will be hearing a presentation from staff providing an informational update on the 2020 Community Fund Program access. And I'd like to invite Development Officer, Arts Coordinator Amy Dukes to make the presentation.
Hi. Good evening, council members and Madam Mayor. Thank you for having me this evening. I just wanted to give a very quick overview of where we are with the Community Fund and the city's support of nonprofits through the mayor's office. I have up on the screen just the list of what was supported this year for reference in the two categories that I'm going to talk about briefly. So as you probably know, the Community Fund is our competitive granting program for our nonprofits that serve our community. It is meant to increase capacity for them, and often that is through programmatic support and often through capital projects. And you may recall in January, the 2018 recipients came and gave you a presentation of their outcomes of that support. So we are about to release the application for 2020 funding, and we have not made substantial changes to the application, but we are making some changes to the process a little bit. We're going to provide more technical assistance to the nonprofits. We are also going to try to give them better questions in the application so that they can provide more clear answers of how they'll use the funding to build their capacity. And then you will be seeing those recommendations, which will be created by a community review panel again this year, and those will come to you through the budgeting process for 2020. And then with the nonprofit support through the mayor's office, this year we are going to work a little bit harder to get their scopes created before the budgeting process. So during budgeting, we'll be able to tell you exactly what is being funded, and that is actually a little bit different way of doing it this year. And then also, I just wanted to let you know that we are mindful that we have a newly adopted strategic plan, and we want to align these programs better with the strategic plan's goals and objectives, and we're going to be working hard on that for 2021. It's probably going to take us most of 2020 to really get that steered in that direction. So I can answer any questions that you might have, or talk a little bit more if you want.
Thank you, Amy. Question from Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you. I wondered about your last statement regarding how you will align with the strategic plan, and would like a little bit more information about that.
Great. Well, to be honest, because the plan was just adopted recently, we haven't really done that work. I mean, we do need to identify who on staff is really going to focus on that. It probably will be an interdepartmental team working with the mayor's office. But just like all of the departments are figuring out how to make the connections to their work, we're going to do that with our funding programs. And I imagine that the other competitive funding programs, the arts program and the human services, will do that as well, just to better match up what we're hoping to achieve with what the goals and objectives of the plan are hoping to achieve. We also know that there are some gaps in our funding, that we fund lots of human services organizations and arts organizations, but there are elements within the strategic plan that talk about environmental issues, for instance, and this might be a program that can better address some of those needs.
Thank you.
Other questions? It looks like that's it. Thank you very much, Amy.
Thanks for having me.
Next item on the agenda this evening is audience comments. This is the time that audience members can address their council. The guidelines for public participation will be shortly displayed up on the screen. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. There was a sign-up sheet, Tisha? Yes, so there was a sign-up sheet, and we will call the names on the sign-up sheet first. If you did not sign up, I will still ask for other speakers before closing that portion of the meeting. And if you are here as part of a group or a spokesman for a group, please identify that when you introduce yourself. And for those in the audience that are listening to the speakers addressing council this evening, if you are hearing comments and concerns that you strongly support, please raise your hand so the council is aware of the amount of support that's here in the audience with us this evening. Tisha, has anyone signed up to speak this evening?
Yes, Susan Forbes, followed by Mitch Reed.
Thank you. Susan.
I don't remember how much information I need to tell you about myself.
Just your name and address is great.
Okay, I can do that. Susan Forbes, 4307 Providence Point Place, Southeast. I live in Providence Point. I want to make sure that the city council members are aware of the reality of crossing over 43rd Way from Forest Village to go down the hill toward the Rotary. As you sit at the exit, you have to be aware of 3 basic things. First of all, the oncoming traffic traveling up the hill. Second, traffic that is waiting to enter Forest Village coming down the hill. And lastly, the thoroughfare traffic traveling down the hill to East Lake Sammamish Parkway. So that's at least 3 different situations that you have to kind of figure out, when is it going to be safe. This is a lot to consider and judge when you might only have a few seconds to make a hopefully safe decision. There is a waiting space for those of us who dare remain stationary in the middle of the road while we wait for an opening to enter the far lane of the through traffic. And somebody told me once it was called Suicide Lane or something like that. I don't think I made that up. I'm not quite that. But anyway, and I also am of the understanding, and it's not any fact that I've heard, but I understand that that particular lane where you're supposed to wait as the oncoming traffic is flying down the hill, and it's narrow by a foot or something like that. So if that's true, that would be awesome, if that could be widened. As a matter of fact, I talked with a woman this afternoon who was in an accident in this lane and was hit by a car, and she's here. It was not a serious accident, therefore not a serious injury. Her right-hand mirror was hit by a car coming down the road. And there were no injuries. The lady who hit her coming down the road, her mirror was hanging down, and I'm not sure what shape Mary's was in, but I'm sure it wasn't in very great shape. And I celebrate that it wasn't a serious injury, because if the woman was just about 4 inches closer to Mary, it could have been a very serious accident. And they really do fly down that road. Not everybody, but they pass the 35 mile an hour sign, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm free, and then they just go down fast. I want to also make sure that the City Council is aware of another problem for us, and I'm coming specifically from traveling out of Forest Village. I'm noticing that it's hard for me to judge how much time I have from where I look down the road towards Providence Ridge, and I see the cars. So it's hard for me to judge how much time I have when that car is going to be close to me. You're looking down the hill, and for my depth perception or whatever it is, it's very hard. And there have been a couple of times where I thought I had plenty of time and I didn't. The car was really almost on top of me before I really knew it. So in my imagination, which I do have a pretty good one, I imagined that I really wanted to try to know the difference in the amount of time I have with different speeds. So I called my friend Carol Eldridge, and we did a little survey. It's I can't go to court with it because it's just us and my cell phone. But what we did is we drove down 43rd Way, went around the Rotary, and came up, and I tried to keep my car coming up the hill at 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, 50. Oh, that's my minutes?
Susan, if you want to take a little bit of time just to wrap up, that would be great.
Okay.
But I'd also, if you've brought anything in writing and you want to leave it with the clerk, all the council will get a copy of it as well.
Okay, yeah. So at 40 miles an hour, we started timing at Providence Ridge, and then we stopped timing when we got to Forest Village entry. 40 miles an hour, 16.8 seconds it took. 45 miles an hour, 13.68, 50 miles an hour, 11.95, and 55 miles an hour, 10.45. So there's close to a 6-second difference in 40 to 55. And that is a lot of time that we might need to get over to the other side and be safe, or get into the middle.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. So I beg you, for all of us, and certainly for myself, that find the money, because we really need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to leave your notes with the clerk,
Yes,
Susan?
but
Okay, that's great. Right over here with Tisha, and she'll make sure the council all gets a copy of it as well, or Emily. Thank you.
Next, we have Mitch Reed, followed by Don Miller. If you're second up on the list, please start making your way to the podium, please.
If you haven't provided public comments before, there is a little light signal that we keep up on the podium with you. It starts out as green when you're talking, and when you're getting close to the end of the 5 minutes, it goes yellow, and at the end it goes red. So that's just to cue you if you need some assistance. Mitch, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I'm pleased to address you. Mitchell Reed. I live in Providence Point and have done so for about the past 6 years. I'll try not to take up too much time. One of the finest evenings of my life was having my 16-year-old daughter, rather 19-year-old daughter at the time, meet with my friend who was then 101 years old. My 19-year-old had never met anybody who would be considered old by her standards and over 100. That night turned out to be a great experience for my daughter, probably not for my neighbor. But she is a wonderful lady who I have the pleasure of knowing and visiting with many times a week. But I almost did not have that pleasure because she was driving south on 43rd. Rather north, I get confused too easily on north and south, when she attempted to make a left-hand turn. As she made the turn, a young lady who was 17 years old, driving south, inadvertently hit the accelerator rather than the gas, thus T-boning her car. She broke her leg, she broke her arm, the car was totaled, and she spent 3 months in a rehabilitation facility. On August 4th, she will celebrate her 103rd birthday, and I do hope I can motivate the council to send her a birthday card. She's probably the second oldest resident at Providence Point. She plays bridge, gets around like a champ, and is probably smarter than I am. But maybe that's not too difficult. Anyway, I urge you to build that traffic light, and I'd like to say now, although I know capital improvements are very important. But sometimes we have to step out of our routine and look at the actual human issue. By the time our community enlightens you as to the statistics that we've gathered, if you're not sleeping, you probably will be. Because there are too many cars going too fast, and as you all know, the school district is about to build a high school and an elementary school adjacent to our property. So I ask, knowing that you have a capital improvement project and understanding that timetable, if you would be kind enough to relook at that issue and address it outside of the timetable. We need that light. We need it now. It is an urgent matter of public safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mitch. Don?
Good evening. My name is Don Miller. I'm from Providence Point, live in Forest Village. Okay. We seniors here from Providence Point are of the generation that tried to do right things in our professional and business career. We certainly made mistakes, but to the degree that we won the Cold War, we feel we did at least something right. Our country was made safe. Now it's your turn to do something right to make a safe intersection at Southeast 43rd Way and Providence Point. Last Monday night, the city administrator presented decisions which you need to make. These decisions impact the traffic light on Southeast 43rd Way. You can either kick the can down the road or not, and approve that project now. We've all been taught that we should collect all the information we need before making a decision. I'm here to tell you, you never will. There will always be ambiguity. Some may worry about the future economy. but the time has come after 12 years of delay to have courage and make the right decision now. There is no better time than now. The cost of money is low, the cost of delay is high. Construction costs only continue to go up. Design work has been completed, statistics have been collected. You have heard or will heard how the traffic on Southeast 43rd Way is high, and the trend line is only going up. It is dangerous and increasingly difficult for Forest Village residents to cross essentially a 4-lane highway where traffic races up the hill at speeds often exceeding 55 miles an hour. The reason for that race is we're 2 lanes going up the hill, but shortly afterwards it converges to 1 lane. Who's going to be first and get ahead into that single lane? The situation reminds me of a variation of the school levy slogan. If you think education is expensive, try ignorance. In our case, if you think safety is expensive, try an accident. To that end, you need to know that Providence Point has retained an attorney. As an old duffer, I can tell you there are ghosts. Some might call these regrets. Either way, they haunt you. Our military has used the phrase, "Don't let one man see another's ghost for lack of training." For you, I pray, don't let yourself see another person's ghost for the lack of a traffic signal at Providence Point. Now is the time to provide the seniors at Providence Point safe access to and from 43rd Way. You have the power, the financial capacity, the design, the statistics, judging the need, the rational arguments, and the personal stories of seniors who have been injured or traumatized. I'd like to believe that now, since we seniors have passed the leadership mantle to you, that you will make the right decision for the safety of the seniors in your community. Approve the traffic light on 45th Way now, 43rd Way.
Thank you, Don. Tisha, is there anyone else that has signed up this evening?
Yes, Ron Imhoff and Ed Petroy.
Hello, my name is Ron Imhoff.
Ron, I'm going to get you to get a little, there you go.
Sorry. Hello, my name is Ron Imhoff. I have lived in the Providence Point neighborhood for 1 year. So I don't have the same long history as others in the neighborhood. What I and others do have is a need to be able to cross 43rd Way, to be able to walk from one side of Providence Point to the other, walking, not driving. Right now, it's so difficult to cross that most don't try. I have walked across several times in the last year, but I feel like I must run across before the next speeding car comes up or down the hill. Last week, I met with some others for an evening meeting, and because of the amount of traffic, I drove so I wouldn't get run over crossing the street. If I'd wanted to cross at a marked crosswalk, I would have had to walk 2 miles. The nearest crosswalk is either a mile up or a mile down the street. That's not a good way to visit neighbors. So if Issaquah truly is a safe, walkable city and a place where we can live, work, and play, it wouldn't be so difficult to cross 43rd at Providence Point. So you need to fund the traffic light now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Ed?
Hello, my name is Ed Peteroy. I live in Forest Village in Providence Point. I'm going to talk briefly about Southeast 43rd Way and Southeast Issaquah Fall City Road to and from Lake Sammamish Parkway. How they are like. Number one, they both carry over 21,000 vehicles per day. That's based on your numbers. That's the total number in both directions, Monday through Friday. And that's a very large number of cars and trucks per day. 43rd Way carries 90% of the number of vehicles that Southeast Issaquah Falls City Road carries. How are they different? One, Southeast Falls City Road has not one but two traffic lights with clearly marked crosswalks within 1 mile of turning onto it from East Lake Sammamish Parkway. This not only allows pedestrians to cross the road, but also keeps the average speeds down. And it serves as a traffic calming function that enhances safety. Southeast 43rd Way has no traffic signals or lights. Second, Southeast Issaquah Falls City Road appears to be twice the width of Southeast 43rd Way. It has 2 traffic lanes up to the Sammamish Plateau and 2 down, and they also have clearly marked turning lanes on both sides or in the center. 3, with no traffic lights on Southeast 43rd Way, the 40-mile-per-hour speed limit means that the average speeds are closer to 50 to 55 miles per hour. Cars will race up the plateau past the main entrance of Providence Point and Forest Village because the 2 lanes are merged and nobody wants to be second in life. When a person is driving downhill on Southeast 43rd Way toward East Lake Sammamish Parkway and needs to make a left turn into Forest Village, there's a 10-foot parcel of ground that a person needs to stop their car in. If they go too far, they go into oncoming traffic. If they don't go far enough, they block traffic and get rear-ended. Money. The Issaquah Finance Director addressed us on May 13th, and she was correct. The good times are now. Interest rates are very low. Stock market and interest rates move in cycles, and money is cheap. The time to do the traffic light is now. Lastly, I'll address values. Recently, the City Council issued guiding principles that were signed by the mayor and the council. It outlined the principles that they were going to follow in Issaquah, and it forms a contract with its residents. Here are 2 of these principles. 1, safety in our Issaquah community is paramount. Second, equity, ensuring that Issaquah's services are accessible to all. I do not see how the council can evaluate Southeast 43rd Way as being safe. Council certainly is not treating the citizens who might be over 55 the same as ones who are not. In the nearly 2-mile stretch between East Lake Sammamish Parkway traffic circle and the middle school in Sammamish near East Issaquah Pine Lake Road, there is not one traffic calming device on Southeast 43rd Way. Not one. In conclusion, getting the Southeast 43rd light done now ensures safety and equity and fulfills council's guiding principles. Thank you for your time and attention in this matter.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, that's what I was looking. I look up here and I see hands in the air. There we go. There are a lot of hands in the audience supporting the comments. Tisha, who else is on our sign-up list?
Ernest Wolf, followed by Neonia Lawrenson.
I'm just turning my hearing aid off because you may be able to hear me a little better. My name is Ernest Wolf. I live in Providence Point, Forest Village. I've been there about 5.5 years. You've seen my face here before, and many of you were involved with the effort to pass a bond that would have paid for the traffic light several years ago. I was a poster boy for the printed handout created by Kathy Allen of the Connections Group that many of you have seen before. And several of you were, as individuals, on the campaign committee that made a strong effort to get the bond passed. It did by 54%. So a majority of our citizens approved our traffic light. If that doesn't give you some direction, I don't know what will. You have an issue on tonight's agenda that affects Providence Point. You are wrong in thinking that a transportation benefit district tax increase with Prop 1, as recommended by your staff, should take care of the city's commitment to us for a traffic light 13+ years ago, when that light was part of your campaign to keep Providence Point from becoming part of Sammamish. That was their choice at the time. During that recent bond campaign, Bob Brock, someone you likely all know, your former Public Works Engineering Director, encountered me posting promotional signs supporting the bond. Subsequently, I received a long email from Bob telling me that we would be wrong to vote for the bond since we already had a commitment for the traffic light at the time of the annexation vote. Bob might be here tonight to tell you this himself, except for health reasons, unfortunately. He knows this well, since it must have been Bob who worked with a civil engineer resident in Providence Point, still living there, to create the plans that evolved into the multi-page design by Petite Engineering in February 2007. You have long had councilmanic bond borrowing capacity to pay for the traffic light project, but have chosen to ignore that. The traffic data obtained from you dates back to 2017, so it's 2 years old. The way Sammamish has been developing, those numbers can certainly be expected to be higher. And you heard those numbers from Ed. And consider that you have two totally different roads with practically the same traffic. That's what we face in Providence Point. With Issaquah Falls City Road about to be closed because of their bridge reconstruction, our southeast 43rd Way traffic can certainly be expected to increase further. Your staff has been well aware of all of this, and we have continued to be totally ignored for all practical purposes. It's impossible to define this history as anything but major neglect. Jim, that's for your benefit. The radar speed detectors on our road confirm that we have very frequent vehicle speeds up to 55 miles an hour and beyond. If you came to this meeting tonight on your bicycle, would you dare to travel that way across Southeast 43rd between our villages? And I know we have some cyclists here. Our patience has worn thin. We are focused on driving meaningful outcomes for our community. We have a strong neighborhood that demands a safe neighborhood. At our most recent Umbrella Board meeting, the hiring of an attorney to address this matter was approved, and I imagine you will soon hear from him, depending on what the council chooses to do next. The attorney has already commented that, in quotes, "This project has been postponed for many years, and commencing of construction should not be delayed any further." I hope today's discussions may be helpful as the CIP issues are discussed on the June 5 meeting and beyond, and we're looking forward to the July public hearing. Hopefully we'll get good news. And I'd like to share these with your secretary.
Thank you, Ernie. Neonia, and lots of hands in the air for Ernie's comments.
Good evening. My name is Neoma Lawrenson, and I am the current president of Forest Village.
Sorry.
That's okay, Ernie. The residents of Providence Point are 55 and over. That's a fact. Some still work. Many volunteer in places in Issaquah and the surrounding areas. We vote. We pay our taxes. We moved to Providence Point because of its beauty, its location, and because it was a safe, gated community. In 2003, we annexed to Issaquah, and I am quoting here from Ernie's little face that says, Providence Point was annexed in 2003 to the city of Issaquah with a promise, underlined, to improve road conditions for both motorists and pedestrians. That was 16 years ago. 12 years ago, we began to make requests for a traffic light on 43rd and Providence Point Place. 12 years ago. And here we stand tonight, still asking for that traffic light. There are many activities at Providence Point. Most are on the north side of 43rd and some are on the south side. All residents must cross 43rd to participate in these activities. Most drive, but to my amazement, some walk. Some walk across 43rd where there is no crosswalk or even a watch for pedestrians sign. Only a traffic light can improve both vehicle safety and allow pedestrians to cross without endangering their lives. Endangering their lives. Over the past years, traffic on 43rd, or Interstate 43rd, as it is often called by our residents now, has increased dramatically. Speeds well exceed the posted limits. I have watched that posted 35 speed limit sign coming up 43rd and seen it flash from 45 to 55 to 60 continuously from mid-afternoon to evening. And the same scenario is true coming down to 28th, where Forest Village residents need to turn left to get into their village. I would question how many of you deal with speeds of 45 or more to enter or exit your community. We know that you have options. We know there is some money available at this time. We know you have borrowing privileges. We know also that this project will not ever become less expensive. We also know that you don't like to hear the same information over and over and over. So unless you want to see us again, unless you want a repeat of all of this great information and all of these statistics, do the right thing. Do the safe thing. Be the city council that finally fixes this dangerous, even life-threatening intersection at 43rd and Providence Point Place. We implore you to proceed and fund this light, and do it now. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your service to the city's citizens of Issaquah.
Thank you. Lots of hands in the air. Tisha, do we have some more speakers signed up?
Yes, Muriel Peterson, followed by Leslie Popst.
First of all, I'd like to give a shout out to the Issaquah Police. I make cookies for them regularly. Two of their officers I'm really fond of. Oh, I'm Muriel Peterson.
Thank you.
I live in Forest Village, 4406. I don't think we have to give all that. I've lived there. I moved from Sammamish, where I bought a house in 1989. I went through the whole drill of us becoming, I always knew I'd moved to Providence Point. I've been there 11 years, going on 12. And I know from attending meetings in Sammamish that Sammamish wanted Providence Point. Would they have had their light? Probably by now. But we elected to go, and I didn't live there then, I lived in Sammamish, with Issaquah because they promised the traffic light. And that's why they voted Providence Point to go with the city of Issaquah. Anyway, thank you very much. I'm leaving.
Thank you, Muriel. Leslie?
Hi, my name is Leslie Popst. I live at 506 Sky Country Way in Issaquah, and my mom moved to Providence Point 2 years ago, and I was excited to tell her that, oh, there's going to be a stoplight put in there. Don't worry about it. It's going to be great. And now I'm nervous that it's not even going to happen. And I'm sad and embarrassed to say that until my mom moved to Providence Point, I was one of the speeders up the hill. It's just... It's so easy to speed that hill, both up and down. And now that I'm aware that she lives there and I go visit her all the time, it's pretty eye-opening how horrible that road is. So I just encourage you to really consider it as part of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Isha?
Riva Turtle, followed by Hart Sugarman.
Eva? That is our. We'll go to Hart and we'll come back to Riva if she's still here.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name's Hart Sugarman. I live at 2550 Northwest Oak Crest Drive, and I've been a resident of Summerhill Community in Issaquah for 23 years. I stood at the podium here in November 13th, 2017 to address my concerns about the intersection of Newport Way and Oak Crest Drive. At that time, I thanked the city and staff for hosting and conducting the various Newport Way corridor workshops. In the transportation capital requests, project TR022, Newport Way from State Road 900 to Southeast 54th improvements address the corridor in the 2015 pedestrian crossing study, and was also discussed in the Central Issaquah Plan. It now looks like this project is getting pushed back to a completion date towards 2028. This is very disappointing. With the construction of the Riva Townhomes, which is now underway at our intersection of Newport Way and Oak Crest Drive and Riva Lane, it'll be built out by the developer, that intersection. This calls for the widening of Newport Way to 3 lanes with center left turn lanes. As I mentioned back in 2017, the city has now created a 4-way intersection. There are 19 intersections along Newport Way. This will be the first and only intersection without a traffic signal. We're already experiencing the challenges of putting in the roadway Riva Lane directly opposite Oak Crest Drive, especially during the certain times of day when there's constant flow of traffic. As vehicles try to exit from either side, they must first wait for that break in traffic on Newport Way. Then, who goes first? Vehicles facing each other try to exit simultaneously. It's just an accident waiting to happen. We've seen a lot of growth and development in our immediate area along Newport Way. Anthology Apartments has added 400 units. Under construction now is the Revel Issaquah Senior Apartments, which is 146 units. And under construction is the Riva Townhomes, 36 units. The grand total, 582 new units. By comparison, if we add up our current existing homes in the vicinity, Summerhill has 55, Spyglass Hill has 60 units, Sammamish Point 132 units, Bentley House has 47 units, Pinecone Terra Highlands has 78 homes, plus there's 2 single-family homes at 2315 and 2300 Newport Way. So we add that up, the current residents, 374. So now this area is going to grow from 374 to 956 units within this very year, 2019. That's over 250% additional growth. As the increased number of vehicles adds more traffic volumes to Newport Way, it becomes increasingly more difficult to exit our subdivision. Now that we see the success of this roundabout on Maple Street at Trader Joe's and Target, I would like to propose this type of roundabout at our intersection. I believe our intersection can accommodate this roundabout. There are a number of positive benefits to having a roundabout. It reduces the speeding vehicles along Newport Way, creating a calming effect. It allows residents to safely exit Summerhill and Riva townhomes and integrate into the traffic flow. There's no need for a four-way stop sign, and there's no need for a traffic light. It allows pedestrians to cross the 2 lanes of traffic instead of 3 lanes. It also provides the pedestrians a safe refuge island between the travel lanes. It also eliminates the sightline challenges when we egress from Summerhill, and it also eliminates the sightline challenges from people egressing from Riva townhomes. It eliminates the potential for a head-on collision. So please give this your consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hardin. If you wouldn't mind leaving the letter, that would be great. Tisha, is there anyone else signed up?
Yes, the last speaker signed up is Joe Werner.
And Riva. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Joe Werner. I live at 1230 Oakwood Place Northwest in the Summerhill subdivision. I only have 2 items to comment on this evening. First one is a bit of housekeeping. At the May 6th City Council meeting, after discussing the AA Creek culvert redesign, the council members had their own little sidebars. But for the softer voices and not bending over to the microphone, the audience had difficulties hearing. And I'll give you just one example. This is not criticism, it's just observation. When Stacy, when you were talking, we couldn't hear you. Well, we could hear tone, but we couldn't understand words. So we walked out of the meeting saying, what's with Stacy? She says that Summerhill is on the attack. But what you actually said was Summerhill has been under attack for years with the traffic and the development on Newport Way. Speak closer to the microphone. And my recommendation, put the traffic light at Providence Point soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Lots of hands in the air. Is there any, I'm just going to check and see if Riva is here. I did see her earlier. She was on the sign-up list. Not seeing her. At this point in time, if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to address council, please come forward and identify yourself at the microphone. I see one person coming up.
Good evening. Mayor, council members, thank you for having us here this evening. It's so nice to see so many Providence Point people here. I am Sandy Hare. I live at 4101 220th Place Southeast in Providence Point, and I've been a resident there for almost 4 years. I come to you with a different message than the others. I too would like to see the traffic light there for the reasons that have already been expressed, so I won't bore you with those details. But ironically, I come here because I merge the 2 opinions that have been expressed about Providence Point and about Newport Way. In 2015, I was involved in a traffic accident that killed a 4-year-old little boy on Newport Way. Some of you may have been on the council at that point in time. It happened because the traffic, it wasn't a traffic signal. The pedestrian signal at that intersection was very poorly designed, and I couldn't see it because of the glare of the sun at that point in time. 2 years later, we went to a civil trial. The city of Issaquah and I were both defendants in that trial, brought by the parents of that little boy. I won't go into all of the details because I don't know if the city of Issaquah had a privacy agreement or whatever legal terms are for that. But the city of Issaquah had to pay a very large sum of money to the family because the design of the sign was not adequate, or whatever the terms were used in that point in time. I'm sorry, it still gets to me. I still suffer PSD as a result, and I've never driven down that road since then. So it's unusual to me to hear that there's all of this building going on that street now. But there's a lot of building going on around Providence Point now as well. I don't see the roads getting any wider, but I see a lot more traffic. I see a lot more people backing up in traffic, and I see a lot of speeding that has never stopped in the 4.5 years that I have lived at Providence Point. My point is, I don't want to see Issaquah have to pay out another large judgment for another accident in another place close to where I live. If there is the money, and I hear that there is, if this is the time, and I hear that now there is, now is the time to put in that traffic signal so another person doesn't have to die, whether it be a young child or an older person like myself. If you have the means to do it now, please seriously consider doing so. A traffic signal is a lot better than going to a funeral. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sandy. Lots of hands in the air. Is there anyone else that would like to address council this evening? Come on forward to the microphone. Name and address, that would be great.
My name is Beverly Nichols, and I also live in Providence Point. And I just want to add to what Mitch Reed said earlier. His friend is also my friend. We all live in the same building. And the accident happened several years ago. She wasn't 101 when the accident happened, but her car did roll over. It was T-boned so hard, and it was a terrible accident, like he said. The car was totaled, and she had broken bones and was in rehab for several months and everything. And every day there's a possibility of something like that happening again. And I really implore you to put the traffic light in that you promised so many years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. Hands in the air. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council this evening? Come on forward, sir.
I'm Jack Lowe's. I live in Providence Point, Forest Village. Looking around here, I would guess that 80% or so of the people here are old enough to be your parents, of every one of you. Grandparents, somebody said. So would you like to have your parent or grandparent drive across from Forest Village to the other side of Providence Point with the traffic up and down? Worse yet, would you like them to try walking across? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak this evening? Come on forward, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, and thank you for giving us this time to express our concerns. My name is Dan Srebny, and I also live in Providence Point in the Forest Village area. And I won't repeat all the cogent and pertinent comments that my fellow residents have made about the need for this traffic light and the need to keep the promises that the city has made over the years. But I'll just add that while this is an issue of concern for the safety and well-being of the residents of Providence Point, it is not just out of our own concern that we're requesting that this promise be kept. There are thousands of residents of Issaquah that drive Southeast 43rd Way every day. There are hundreds, perhaps thousands of children who go on that road every day. There are at least dozens of new drivers who are driving on this road where the speed limits are often exceeded and the driving attention is often less than it should be. And then you add folks like us whose vision is not as good as it used to be, whose timing is not as good as it used to be, who are frequently driving on 43rd Way or crossing from one side of Providence Point to another. This creates a danger not only to the community who lives there and the communities that are being built below and above and the schools that are being built, but to all the residents who drive the road regularly. So we ask for the sake of all of those citizens who reside in Issaquah and who pay taxes here, that this be funded now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Lots of support, lots of hands raised. Is there anyone else who would like to address council this evening? Is Riva back in the building? Okay, I'll ask a second time. Is there anyone else who would like to address council during audience comments? And a third? Okay, thank you all for coming in and thank you for the comments. The majority of them tonight were about Southeast 43rd Light. As the city administrator had said, there is not a decision tonight that the council will be taking on this project, but it is good that you all came and you all gave your information and your facts so that council could hear it and it's on camera and it's recorded. So thank you very much for that. Moving off of audience comments, we'll start with committee and regional reports, and we'll start with Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. I have no report at this time.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 3 regional reports this evening. On May 8th, I attended the King Conservation Advisory Committee meeting. In this meeting, we finalized our letter from the King Conservation Advisory Committee to the King Conservation District Board of Supervisors regarding our advice on their proposed rate increase. The Advisory Committee was generally supportive of the work that the King Conservation District does, and we also had a number of recommendations regarding clarity as far as what they put forward in the proposal, what work will be funded by the proposed rate increase specifically, and then what could also be funded by additional funding if they do acquire additional funding from grants. And this also reflects some of the feedback that we heard at the PIC, the Public Issues Committee by Sound Cities Association. The next meeting of the King Conservation District Advisory Committee has not yet been set. On May 16th, I attended the WIRA 8 Water Resource Inventory Area 8 Salmon Recovery Council meeting. We heard an update on salmon-related topics from the last legislative session. WIRA 8 Salmon Recovery Council connected with a number of officials in the state legislature to give our point of view on the salmon, particularly the salmon habitat issues that were at the legislature. And the state legislature's capital budget did reflect increasing funding for the Puget Sound Acquisition and Restoration Program, including the Riverbend Floodplain Restoration Project on the Cedar River. And that was extremely important for salmon recovery. So we were very happy with that outcome. And the WIRA 8 Salmon Recovery Council wrote a letter to the legislature to thank them. And then we also discussed the 2020 WIRA 8 budget and work plan and the funding recommendations regarding different science and research that should be funded to support salmon recovery. And then we also heard 2 guest presentations. One was from Chris Brummer, the King County Rivers and Floodplain Management, about flood control district priority projects in YRA 8. And this was interesting because they do floodplain management work, and we talked about how that might align with habitat restoration work in the future, and how YRA 8 might work with the floodplain management folks. And then we also talked, we also heard a presentation about the Holder Creek riparian restoration project. This is a riparian restoration project that's right outside of Issaquah, and it is a King County ecological restoration project where they're restoring habitat that for a long time was grazed. The next meeting of the Salmon Recovery Council will be on Thursday, July 18th from 2 to 4:15 p.m. And then lastly, on May 9th, I attended the Cascade Water Alliance Resource Management Committee meeting. Of note for this group, the Cascade will be using a newly approved herbicide called Procelicor, and this is less expensive and for water management and for milfoil, to treat milfoil for water quality on the Lake Tapps Reservoir. And we also discussed the Seattle Public Utilities block contract negotiations. The July 2013 block contract with Seattle Public Utilities provides that either party can request consideration of an extension, and so Cascade intends to begin discussion with the Seattle Public Utilities in the near future so that they can start discussing that, and that the decision can be included in Cascade's transmission and supply plan. The next meeting of the Cascade Water Alliance will be Wednesday, May 22nd at 3:30 p.m. at the Cascade office in Bellevue, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Ray.
Thank you, Mayor Pauley. On May 9th, I attended the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board meeting. There were a number of key items on the agenda. We received a briefing from the fire chief. The first item was related to PFAS and PFOA. The chief mentioned that Senator Mullet was successful in passing legislation in the last Washington State legislative session that included a $400,000 budget for remediation. Thank you, Senator Mullet. We also talked briefly about the Falls City merger that would have merged Fire District 28 with Fire District 10 and added Falls City into the Eastside Fire and Rescue family. That initiative failed. We talked briefly about Fire Ground 101 recap. We talked about that at our last meeting. The chief attended Congressional Fire Service Institute, which was in Washington, D.C., which gave him and a number of other chiefs in King County an opportunity to speak with our federal senators and representatives. And then the chief also attended the employer support of Guard and Reserve banquet, where Eastside Fire and Rescue received an above and beyond award for support of Eastside Fire and Rescue members who are deployed in military service. And just a couple of interesting other things on the agenda was the board approved a resolution to exempt Eastside Fire and Rescue from an alternative fuel requirement that is coming out of the state. There's a provision to exempt public safety agencies from the alternative fuel requirement. That will also have to come to this body for review and deliberation also. We had a brief discussion on accreditation and also on the Washington State Ratings Board and the impact that that might have on our rating as a fire district and small changes there. And that was wraps up Eastside Fire and Rescue. The Services and Safety Committee did not meet this month, and that concludes my report this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Winterstein.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I only have to report on the Council Infrastructure Committee. We met last Thursday, May 16th, here in Council Chambers. There was one item on the agenda and then a project status update that we got. The agenda item was Agenda Bill 7793, the Anti-Aircraft Culvert Streambed Rehabilitation Project. After a presentation discussion with staff, the committee voted to refer that agenda bill to tonight's agenda. It's on the consent agenda for approval to award the maintenance contract as requested by staff. Then the project status was about the WashDOT bid opening of the project for the I-90 auxiliary lanes, and that was scheduled to be open last Wednesday, the 15th, but it's been extended, and now it's going to open up on 2 days from now. So 2 days from now, we'll know more about that WashDOT project and what it means for us in Northwest Sammamish Road. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No report tonight.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Batiste.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No report this evening.
Council President Martz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee met on Wednesday, May 8th. We did have the pre-pick meeting was Ann McFarland's using Robert's rules to keep discussions civil and cordial. And then in the regular meeting, there was no proposed action considered. King County Growth Management Policy Council, GMPC, will be meeting on Wednesday, July 24th. The agenda is still TBD. That concludes my report.
Thank you. For the mayor's report, there will be no executive session this evening. Last week, National Police Week, I made a proclamation on May 15th at the Police Department briefing. I issued a proclamation for the week of May 12th to 18th, 2019 to be National Peacekeepers and Police Officers Week to pay special tribute to those men and women who serve our community. I thank them for their service they provide to our community by safeguarding life and property and protecting our residents and businesses. I want to provide in my mayor's report through most of the summer an update on the city administrator recruitment. So we have hired our consultant to do this recruitment, and we are using Karis Consulting. There were some stakeholder interviews conducted over the last 2 weeks with our city leadership team and members of our city council, and the purpose of these interviews was to gather input as to the qualifications of the ideal candidate we are seeking. Applications will be accepted until June 12th. The city staff and public who wish to provide input into the hiring process are encouraged to participate in an online survey that we will be posting shortly. And we're hoping to complete our first round of finalist interviews in July. Also, there will be a public forum to meet the finalists on July 25th, location TBD. The 2019 Job Fair. The City of Issaquah hosted its 6th annual Job Fair on May 8th at the Pickering Barn. There were 44 participating businesses and over 220 applicants, and I want to thank the city staff for hosting and to volunteers that came that day and provided resume review and interview prep for the applicants at the fair. Talk a little bit about the Parent Project. The Issaquah Police Department participates in a nationally recognized program. The Parent Project focused on changing destructive adolescent behavior. They just completed the 2nd series of classes last month and have had very good feedback. The program was created to empower parents, specifically those with strong-willed, difficult, or out-of-control adolescents. This 10-week program, and this is a 10-week program, and the city will be offering it twice a year in the spring and fall. And for those interested in participating in the next series of the Parent Project, or just to get more information, please reach out to Corporal Ryan Smith by emailing him at ryanps@issaquahwa.gov. The next, I held a coffee with the mayor event this weekend up at Talus at Anchorhead Coffee, and the next Coffee with the Mayor event will be held on Thursday, June 6th from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at the Starbucks Coffee on Gilman. I look forward to engaging with the communities at these events, and we are moving them around town, different days of the week, different times, and different locales to see if we can get into as many different neighborhoods as we can. 425 Magazine has just completed an article called, I think it's the Best City Awards, or I think it's a broader name than that. But in its annual edition, it has listed Issaquah as winning the best city recognition this year. There were several other categories for businesses in town and events in town that were also local winners. Best Festival, Salmon Days, Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce, Best Live Theater, Village Theater, and Best Shoe Shop, Crush Footwear. So that was a fun article to read. And we usually, on this meeting, have a visitor from the VFW who comes to make sure we're all aware of what's going on Memorial Day, but Dave is unable to join us today. He's out of town. I wanted to provide some information on Memorial Day celebrations on Monday. So our local VFW would like to extend an invitation to the community to attend a 10 a.m. Memorial Day celebration at Hillside Cemetery in Issaquah. Guest speaker will be former Mayor Fred Butler, and they're also hopeful that Congresswoman Kim Schreier will also be able to join and address the crowd. In case of inclement weather that day, the event will be held at the Issaquah Senior Center located beside Memorial Field in Old Town. And that concludes the mayor's report. Proceeding to the consent calendar. The consent calendar was distributed to council in advance. If authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered for approval with one motion. Have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
They have.
Thank you. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move we adopt the consent calendar as listed in tonight's meeting agenda.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. The next and last item under business tonight is on regular business AB 7287, City Council Rules of Procedure. This item came before council at the February 1st special council meeting and at the March 11th council work session. Following the staff presentation this evening, council will have the option to adopt the rules or provide specific direction on the remaining areas of focus and next steps. So our city clerk, Tina Eggers, will make a presentation.
Hi, thank you. Just give me a moment here to pull this up. All right, yes, thank you. And I wanted to thank our Deputy City Clerk, Tisha Gieser, for her work on these draft rules. A lot of time and energy went into drafting them, and thank you. Yes, we're excited to be back in front of you. We were here earlier this year, and the goal at that time was to incorporate the outcomes into the draft rules and to return to a regular council meeting for adoption. These rules, this is a slide you've seen before, but the rules kind of demonstrates the hierarchy or where they fall into other rules or other authority. And the intent is that the rules document your processes, provide specificity, but still allowing flexibility, clarifies processes, and serves as a resource. This slide is to demonstrate the chapters or sections that are built into the rules of procedure. It's a starting point, and it's today's or the current point of time. It's not necessarily to include everything and every detail. Again, to provide some flexibility, and can, of course, be revisited and amended. As such, we'll be returning in August with further amendments for your consideration as we move through the study session model. And while we're not delving into study session transition, this is a timeline that you've seen previous in a memo, and just wanted to show that we would be bringing some informational updates to you in July and bringing additional amendments to you in August. So the rules of procedure are drafted. They're attached to the exhibit of the resolution that's in your packet. And what we'd like to do is bring this back to your deliberation, find out if you have questions, if there's clarity that you're seeking, or any areas that need focus.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
I do know that there are at least a couple of council members who have listed some items, so my suggestion would be that we maybe get all of those out on the table, and the group can look at those and decide if you believe that there's possibility of talking those through tonight and moving to adoption. We can. If you want to take a different path, we can take a different path as well. So maybe I'll start with Councilmember Ray and then move to Councilmember Winterstein.
I just have a couple of clarifications. And first, Tina, what's the urgency on this, given that you're going to be back in a short couple of months to amend this to incorporate the trial of the work study or the study session model?
Simply just trying to move this forward. It's been on the work plan for some time, and this met the deadline of when we last spoke with council.
Okay, thanks.
Did you want to list any of
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Councilmember Winterstein, did you have anything you wanted to put on the table?
There's a number, I don't have them in priority order. Okay. So I'm kind of, well, I tried to distill some of this, and I unfortunately, I think I missed the earlier opportunity, perhaps at work session when you discussed some of these. So,
I think so.
this is might feel a little bit like work session. And this is my first opportunity to have some of these conversations, but no surprises, team. And I like the number one thing I wanted to address was section 4.15, regular business, paragraph B, procedure. I can read it to you, Tina. It's about regular business. Subparagraph A defines what regular business is. Paragraph B, subparagraph B talks about the procedure. And they're enumerated steps beneath that. Introduction by presiding officer, presentation by city staff, such as you just did. Council questions is number 3, council motion is number 4, and then 5 is discussion and possible action. And I believe that in the last probably 3 to 4 years, this council has gotten a little bit more rigorous with this. Give me your questions, then a motion, and then kind of following this. I wanted to put out there, I've never been comfortable with that structure. And I think there needs to be a little bit more leeway. And for example, the idea of maybe not questions not following the motion, or maybe actually going through all these questions before a motion is made. I just think there should be some flexibility in this process. And part of it for me personally is that it's not uncommon for me to be up here and I haven't made my decision yet. I'm still thinking. I'm hearing input from others by asking questions and making comments. I'm learning and digesting the entire topic. So I think there is quite a bit of, I think there is some variety and nuance of how each council member decision-making and thought processes work. So I wanted to have a conversation about this because I know we often do this. Okay, questions. Okay, is there a motion? Okay, now discussion. And I think for me personally, that doesn't always facilitate the process of actually fully discerning and making a decision on a matter.
Did you have a suggestion of how you would want to reword it, or did you just want to have the body of 7 discuss it?
So I'm curious, so it's numbered and it's sequential, and Madam Mayor, I know that you often follow this, and there's been many times where it doesn't work for me. And I was hoping to have a conversation. That's why I said this might feel like a work session, not like a regular business meeting. So that was one of them. And we don't have to discuss it any further right now.
I would love to get a
put that out
list
there.
and then allow you as a group to decide what you want to do with it.
Okay. I wanted to address 4.12, subparagraph C. And I was one of the reviewers tonight. We have to address this. Even that paragraph, the last sentence in paragraph C says, does it seem reasonable that the city has expended this for this purpose and for this amount? I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't think the council really, this is kind of a comment about that report as well. I don't really think we have the right information formatted properly or even legible to really fulfill what that asks. I think it's nearly impossible to do that. That's a sidebar comment, but if we put one other thing in this paragraph, so that's a comment I think for follow-up. It's a different issue. But I would add also to this paragraph something, I think it's very important that we also add a note that we should verify that the finance director's attestation at the beginning of this report. That's a very key element that I look for. And so it goes beyond just looking at trying to understand each of the lines in that report. In so I'm going up, 309, council and staff interactions. under guidelines, number 2. So number 1 says, it's 309. Number 1 says, council, yeah, right, yeah, council, I'm sorry, the first part of the paragraph, I'm sorry, the first part of number 2 says, council, policymakers, and staff as administering the policies. And, you know, it's kind of a language thing, but I just thought that sells staff pretty short. Because it feels, that one basically says, we make the policy, you administer the policy, and there's some truth to that. But I think it falls short of a lot of the interactions that we have, because staff are subject matter experts, and they consult us, as a council member on a range of topics. So I just thought that the way that one was stated, it didn't fully illuminate really what the relationship is. It's more than just carrying out the policies. So now I want you to know I was tempted to add one in there for, to suggest one for council president and deputy president, but you guys might not be interested in this one. I think we just have a rule that the council president, you know, makes a motion to approve consent, and the deputy president makes the
Just so
second.
it's written somewhere.
We seem to follow that. We did it again tonight. One of the things I found, Tina, throughout here, and I have a number of, I won't cite them all to you right now. There's 3 different areas where it talks about agenda. And I think in especially the part where the president works with administration and the mayor on setting the agenda and preparing the agenda. And then I think we lose some of the language that, some of that intent is lost later on. I can get you the details where I found that, Tina. And then it goes back to kind of agenda and setting it. Some of the original details kind of come back into these. So there's some inconsistency in that area. I think the intent is that, I think in the one in the middle, it basically says, city administrator will set the agenda. But I know what really happens, and per the intent of the other ones, it's what happens in leadership, and the president is part of that. But that middle section drops that intent. I have some other, and some of this you just want to consider it, like house cleaning. I think in the appointments section, so I've gone up to 204 now. I appreciate the effort that went in here. I think it's clearer than it was before, and I think there is, but if you didn't know that the optional seats, a lot of times that they have to come early, because right at, it says right there in B that January, that's when we'll find out what you're interested in, but that in B. But in, as it says in paragraph A2, some of them, the regional or optional ones, there is a different schedule. And I think that kind of gets lost in here. The rest of the whole section just talks about the appointments that the mayor and the president make, when in fact, there's a significant role of the mayor and the president and the clerk all involved with just kind of facilitating an application that a council member may make to a regional one, rather than making the appointment itself. I'm going back through my notes. Oh, and then probably the one last significant one, in 4.14, And this has actually come up before. Subparagraph B, it deals with this, so this is quasi judicial decisions and appeals, subparagraph P. In that leading paragraph, the second to last sentence talks about, there's a phrase in there, talks about all documents and exhibits that have been submitted. And I remember a case where some of the submitted material had references or links to other documents, and we had a conversation of whether or not they were in the record or not. And I think it'd be good to get clarification in these of whether or not they are part of the record. And we talked about it then. Some of you might remember that conversation. I don't actually remember the outcome, but I know that that was a question in front of the council, whether or not referenced or linked documents in the record were also considered part of the record and therefore should be provided or not to council.
I think it was made available.
Made available, right. So I just, that's not addressed here. It just says if they've been submitted. And I was just wondering if this should address documents that have been referenced. And, and I have a smaller one. I'm sorry, these are kind of in random order. Down in 4.20, we have, this is a small one. So in recognition, it says raise your hand. But when we sit at like council work sessions, we have all learned to kind of turn our mic on to indicate that we've got a question. And I think there's just multiple ways in which we try to alert the presider that we have something we want to speak about. And it's not just raising the hands. And then in 4.26, which deals with rules of conduct, I think there's a really good paragraph in there. It's 426, A3. General paragraph, subparagraph 3. Council members shall limit the use of electronic communications during meetings in order to ensure that they remain engaged with the public and with each other in the conduct of business. And it goes, and there's a little bit more in there. Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a really good point, but at the same time, maybe there should be some clarification in there about just kind of the use of computers during it. So for example, all my materials are electronic and all my notes are electronic. So I'm still using my electronics during the meeting. And I think that this makes a really good point about the potential proper, or the proper use of electronic communications. But I wouldn't want that to be maybe misunderstood to be use of any electronics during the meetings. And so I think it would be, as a general rule of conduct, that obviously the use of our computers should be allowed.
Yeah, that wasn't the intent to prohibit use of devices.
And it doesn't prohibit it, like you said. I just thought it just seemed like a nice complementary one to add it under the general section, just so it would be clear. Right, I know. Okay, that was the, thanks for your patience and listening as I go through. So I think the first one that I mentioned, which had a real order in questions, motion, discussion, is the one I feel strongest about. And I don't know if it's represented in these rules in the way that I think it ought to be, but that'd be the one I'd like to hear more input from my colleagues about. So that's it. I have there's a few other Scrivener errors, really small ones, but I can get them to you here.
Okay. So thank you. I think I caught about 8 of those, some more higher priority and requiring discussion, others not. Councilmember Ray, from your question, I got the sense that maybe whether on timing of how to do this or discuss, that you may have some thoughts.
Well, there seems to be a sense of urgency to push forward with this. And since we're going to revisit this again later this summer, I'm of the mind that we can push forward with this and get it off the work plan. And then if there are other items we need to address, we can reopen it when we are reopening it for subsequent business.
I want to make sure I understand you. You're saying move, meaning vote tonight to accept and then update it in the fall or whenever?
Yeah, that was my thinking.
Okay, that's what you're suggesting. So what I'd like to do is make sure we hear from all the other council members. You're a body of 7. We've heard from 2, so really would like to know where your thoughts are. Oh, Councilmember Hunt.
I had thoughts on the part about the work session and then the committees. So that is 5.01 and 6.01. And basically, my concern, I think, is around the timing, because currently both of these have this, they have a footnote that these sections are anticipated to be removed, but I think it's potentially more than that. We're going to have a discussion about how they might be changed and how these, so it looks right now it looks like those sections will be removed, but there's not information about what they will replace. And it's a bit strange, I think, to have it just say that this is going to be removed and then not have information about what it will be replacing. And I think that we have to have those conversations, but because of the timing of doing this now, when we're going to have later conversations about transitioning to a study session, I think it makes it awkward to have those footnotes. So that's a comment. And I think if we were to work through these sections later, when we have that, after we've had those conversations about how the work sessions will work in terms of the items that currently go to committee, if we are transitioning to a work session, how those are chaired, how those items are going through this different process, then I think we could have a document that would be more meaningful going forward for how we would structure that. And then I also on the issue that Council Member Winterstein brought up regarding the review of the finance document, I'm not sure which section that is, but within that section, I think it would also be good to have some a statement about what the expectation is for what you do with that question. So right now it says you ask a question, does it seem reasonable? And then it says, that you attest that you reviewed it. But I think there's some more guidance there as far as if you have a question and what do you do with that question? You ask the city clerk or you ask the finance director. So I would just like to put that forward about what, a little bit more guidance on that one. That's it.
Great. And Councilmember Walsh, did you have your hand up?
No, but I'm happy to talk at this time. Generally, I don't think I have a problem with this. To me, it's more of a clarifying compared to the 2010 Council Resource Manual, which was very bulky. I appreciate that this is streamlined. I would like to know, looking at that idea of study sessions, if the section 5 and 6 are going to be removed with that idea, or at least that's what's being proposed here. I assume that a section will be added in there to discuss what the study session rules of procedure are.
Correct. And an ordinance would be provided at that time as well to make IMC adjustments, which is why this was considered phase 1. Phase 2 would come back with amendments and the actual ordinance to change the IMC.
And the timing of that is in the fall?
Well, what we would like to do is well, we're already working towards transitioning to study session format. That's the direction that we received previous. So there's quite a bit of work to go into place to make that happen. And so we would be back in front of council before September. So we were aiming for August with some informational updates in July.
Council President Mertz.
So I think this is a great draft document, and I think it follows on conversations that the council members have had with each other and with the administration. I think it has engendered a further conversation, and I think that we've heard some tonight. Councilmember Ray's being very quiet, but he had a number of points that he shared with council offline.
Everybody's seen those.
Yeah.
Right.
Email.
And so I feel like personally, I feel like I would like to see it doing some sort of retreat to go through this item by item. I just feel like there's a large enough list. This is a great starting point. I don't think this is a fundamentally, I mean, this has to me done exactly what it should do, which is put something out there that we could have a discussion about, and it has engendered a bunch of conversation. But I don't think tonight, I don't think we want to try to finish this conversation tonight. I think the administration has heard both from us tonight and from Councilmember Ray's written comments where the points of discussion are, and I'm confident that with one offsite, we could get through that list and talk through it amongst ourselves. And I also think that the nature of council duties are a little different than other topics that we cover as a council, and I found the retreat process late this winter to be helpful in being away from the dais. I normally love being up here. I love the 8 of us talking up here, but I think that these topics were, we got better, we got a more candid conversation when we were in retreat format. So, if the majority of the council wants to move forward tonight, I don't have any heartburn over it, but I would prefer that we take this up in retreat.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Batiste.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to start out just by throwing out a few more issues for the list. And as I was reading through one more time, a couple of things came up for me in section 2.02B on the survey. This is the election of council president and deputy council president. It says that that's going to happen in December, and it will be shared prior to the election of leadership in January. I was just going to say, usually by the time we get to December, where there's holidays and that kind of thing, it seems like it's a little bit late. So something that's brand new, the survey, and so we want to make sure that it actually is working the way that it should be working. And I'm just wondering if a little bit earlier might be better for everyone to then understand who is interested in leadership a little bit earlier than that. And then number 5 in that same section, process C5, where it talks about if the first nominee receiving a majority vote is declared the new council president, if there's a tie vote, the mayor may choose to break the tie. I just think in terms of the council leadership, and I don't have any wording that I've thought through here, but maybe if there would be an interim step, another vote, or something that would leave that to the council, as opposed to putting the mayor in the situation to have to think about breaking a tie, especially right at the beginning after that first vote. So maybe something additional there. Then 4.12, the accounts payable payroll review. I won't repeat what Councilmember Winterstein and Councilmember Hunt spoke about, but I agree with both of those comments. I think that we need to have more information there, and maybe just a review of that section in general. I think some more about that. And then 5.01E. So this has to do with the work sessions, and again, I won't go back to what other council members have talked about, just in terms of whether that's going to be in there or not in there, and those revisions and being able to work through that. But also, when we talk about the agenda preparation in E, it says a majority of the council 4 members may request an item to be added to a future work session agenda. I believe Councilmember Ray had the same question, and I had read the response. However, I would just say, and I understand it's a majority of the council, but I would, typically if we've had 3 members that have been interested, that was something that could go forward, and this is just the addition of an item to the work agenda. But so I would love to hear what everybody else has to say there, but I'm not sure if we need to have 4. And I believe that is all, but I've got some questions. I think that we have a fair amount of questions. I think that this has been a really great first draft, but I do think that we're going to need for me, I think, to either come back and read some of the edits to get more information, or another session, as Tola talked about.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. Tina, I just had one question on 2.02A, timing of election of council president and deputy president. It says is to take place the first regular meeting of each calendar year per the code. And we have had those elections, that election before in December.
Correct, you have, and when that occurs, it's in an off-election year, so that you can review that early. When that happens, your code says you can suspend your rules, and so the agenda bill walks you through making that motion to suspend and then conducting the election in December.
Okay, just want to make sure that that's not lost.
You still have that ability.
Okay. In terms of timing, if we were to not vote and take this to a different meeting, I think I'd be more in favor of a work session rather than another retreat. Certainly, not sure I'm interested in a separate new retreat date.
Yeah. Work sessions are full, so we would most likely be looking at a special meeting to accommodate that work. But it doesn't have to be work session format, or sorry, retreat format, if that's not the majority.
Councilmember Winterstein?
Thank you. I want to make my opening comment now. And I really do appreciate it, as long as I've been on the council now, that this is the first time this form at this completeness, and it's responsive to things that have happened. So it is a good body of work. I really do appreciate it, and I wish I had a different setting where we could have gone through it a little bit better. This is my first opportunity, but I think I would like the opportunity to talk about a few other things, but overall, this is a really good document. Thanks for the work. I know Tisha worked on it as well. Thanks to you both.
So I have heard from all of you at least once, and I have heard, let's vote on it tonight, let's have a retreat, and let's do it at a work session. So, Councilmember Ray.
I'd like to propose a alternate, which is to create an ad hoc rules committee.
4 things, 4 options.
And allow the ad hoc committee to work through some of these open issues. And that way we don't get tied up into trying to schedule a work session. I think a group of 3, such as Winterstein, Martz, and Hunt, could do a fantastic job.
Your name's not in that.
Fantastic job of working through the open issues and bring something back that has gotten a second look. So just a different perspective on how to move it and move it forward faster.
Okay, so thank you for that. Ad hocs can also consist of 2. They don't have to be 3, but 2 or 3 on an ad hoc would be great. So I have 4 options on here now. How would you like to proceed as a body on deciding which option you're going to go with? Councilmember Winterstein.
Option 5, committee of 2.
That's sub-option of 4. So we can talk about these 1 through 9. Is there any support in taking a vote on this evening? Doesn't look like so. I heard at least one or two council members talk against doing a retreat. I've heard support for either a work session with all 7 or some sort of ad hoc with 2 or 3 people. Ad hoc? Is that the way we want to go? 2 or 3 people?
Sorry, I had to talk, not to
Oh,
vote.
Tola hasn't even talked.
Well, I had talked earlier, but when you mentioned those 4, I would suggest that of those, either, I said a retreat. I am also sensitive to the fact that people have a hard time sometimes scheduling retreats, so I would be okay with a work session. So I sort of think work session and ad hoc are probably the 2 options, and my suggestion would be that we just decide between those 2 options unless someone feels strongly about one of the others.
Councilmember Goodman.
I think at first mention of ad hoc, it sounds like a great idea. My concern about the ad hoc is I would want to hear those discussions. So Councilmember Winterstein, had a question about the process, the specific process that we have been following. It is now, it's been proposed in the manual. And if there's an ad hoc, that discussion takes place, and it's just going to have to take place again at the full council, because I want to hear that discussion, and if Paul's not in that committee, he's going to want to hear that discussion. So I would prefer work session.
Any other thoughts on ad hoc work session? Mariah?
I would prefer a work session.
Where would the council like to go? Councilmember Hunt.
I just have a thought. So as we proceed to moving things more to work sessions, I imagine this question of ad hoc versus work session will come up more because we'll be having more items going. And so I just wonder about this specific concern that has been raised about how the other council members get the information from the ad hoc, and if we can consider what we can do in terms of providing some sort of record for the other council members, because I imagine that this will come up more and more as we move more towards work sessions.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things we're struggling right now is where that happy place is where you send a detailed issue off to ad hoc, or it's a conversation you all 7 want to have, and not having you repeat ad hoc conversations again in council.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so for tonight, though, these are your rules, so we will go with what you want to do. If the majority feels that on the items that Paul brought up and Mariah and Vicky brought up are best discussed in a group of 7, then it should be a work session. And we will just find another night.
Question, would it be possible to have a recording of an ad hoc? If a facilities, no. Okay.
Which would be a good record.
So I think considering while there is a time issue of this in getting it done, it sounds like we have enough time to find a time that works for everybody to do a work session. So I think I would be supportive of that idea.
So an additional work session, not adding to one of your big meaty ones already, on a weeknight with all 7 of you on camera.
And you could use your cow time in July.
Use
your committee of the whole.
Okay. It's an option.
Can we sit down there?
Can they sit there and not up here? Yeah. How does that sound? We can actually just go tonight with the committee of the whole date as your rules discussion if you want to have it. Getting a lot of head nods.
What's the date?
July 23rd.
It is in the summer, yeah. Yeah. City Administrator Meehan wants to add something.
Just want to share that if we suspend this conversation until late July, I would anticipate that staff would also be bringing to you at that same time the language concerning study session. At that point, then we'll sort of render a little moot, if you still want to stay on that path, those 2 sections that deal with the work session and the committee of the whole. So my 2 suggestions would be either you consider the rules of procedure with the study session language included and those other sections for work session and the cow meeting removed at the end of July, or we try to find a different time in June or later this month even, where you can discuss the rules of procedure as they were drafted for this evening.
Councilmember Ray, Councilmember Winterstein.
So thinking this through a little bit, if I think about what's in the current rules of procedure that we are considering tonight, most of it is a reiteration of state law, city ordinance, and our current processes. There's just a few odds and ends that are new ideas, and none of them are going to happen in the next couple months. So thinking about that and then thinking about Administrator Moon's comment, maybe what we should be doing is, instead of adopting this now or even considering this now, is to go to a work session with the rules of procedure that include our new operating model and method, and just do it once and pick up the open issues that we're seeing that are coming to light this evening at that time, at the end, at that same instance, address how we're going to do the work study model.
So that timing would be?
I think our proposal is to actually start giving you some information in June so that we have a little bit of time to gather some of your input and hopefully arrive at a draft that you have some knowledge of, can understand, some of your questions have been answered, and that it looks like that's going to be the successful language. You'll still have an opportunity to consider it, as Councilmember Ray has suggested, along with everything else that is here. But that late July timeframe would then become a little bit more critical if we were to start the study sessions in August. We would, if we're not able to act for the end of July or very beginning of August, then we may have to end up delaying that ultimate transition.
Can you explain that a little bit more? I know you explained it to me that it's, or Tina did, that it's in the code, how we do it, and so we have to make those changes before we move into it.
Correct.
By ordinance.
Correct. Our municipal code right now spells out the procedure for a work session in the committee of the whole. We would want to add new language with regard to study sessions and make it clear that that's the format that we're using.
Okay, so it is confusing. I mean, it's confusing for you. It's probably enormously confusing for the public, but this first exercise is really taking our old handbook and coming up with something that's more compact. The second one is we're in the middle of a transition of trying out moving from committee. That piece of committee and Cal moving to study session requires a code change that you have to pass before you can actually do it. So that way, if we get hung up in July or August with this, it also means we will not move to the new structure until we pass the ordinance. I think we can get through it. I'm optimistic. Councilmember Ray, Council President Mertz.
I'm a little bit off topic because we're talking about the new structure. My recollection coming out of our retreats is we said we were going to trial the new structure and then evaluate it and then make a determination if that's what we wanted to do. So what we're saying is we have to adopt new ordinances, a new code to implement the new structure, trial it. If we don't like it, then we have to undo everything and go back.
Correct.
Is that
You will
correct?
have to approve an ordinance, and you'll have to approve a different ordinance if you want to go back. Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure I was
Because it's
clear
all
on
codified.
the circle.
It's a good question. Council President Martz.
I just want to ask, in addition to everything else of trying to get stuff done, I believe that July 23rd meeting might be City Administrator Moon's last council meeting, so would the timing of this have any impact on, that have any timing issues with this?
No, I will be here for the first meeting in August as well.
Oh, okay. Good.
Council Member Winterstein.
Thank you for that additional information. I think it would be wise to immediately impanel an ad hoc committee to work toward making the best possible use out of our touch in July. I think there's some lifting that can be done and things clarified, and without compromising the conversation about certain critical items that we still want to have in front of with everybody. I would be open to that.
Can we take an informal vote on that? Can we do a thumbs up for work session first and then a thumbs up for ad hoc? Because I really need to know what the 7 of you think.
I was actually advocating for both with an ad hoc first, leading to prepare, help prepare
so a
for the
small group leading into a work session.
Right.
Okay. Thoughts?
If somebody wants to do the work for do some of the work ahead of time in order to have potentially a more efficient
Work session?
work
Yeah.
session, I think that's fantastic.
Thoughts from others? Council.
I think one of the questions earlier was, can we record or televise ad hoc, and why not, since we can with 3-person committees?
Right, I just think that ad hoc has different rules of governance in terms of record keeping and public noticing, et cetera, et cetera.
So if you televise or record one ad hoc, then you need to do all of them, or?
That would be my concern, that we
Sure.
establish that
Okay.
expectation.
So that would be an additional question when we're doing our,
We would see it as an internal meeting that we would not apply OPMA restrictions to, and nor would we want to set the precedents for that for ad hocs.
sure, my comment was, and I don't know the answer to this, and so maybe it's not even possible, is that when Vicki asked that question, the context was when we try out the work session model, if we have a need for more ad hocs, is there an option for those ad hoc committee meetings to be televised? Because that's a way that council members can get information if they're not on that committee. So it's a question, I don't know the answer. If you have to do all ad hocs the same way, I don't know.
I guess I would wonder too, if the point of having the ad hoc is to have a discussion that all 7 of you can see, maybe all 7 of you ought to have the conversation. To me, the ad hoc sort of makes sense when you have something like the business B&O tax worked really well. That was a taxing conversation. It had 2 people on the ad hoc committee. It had some non-council members on the ad hoc committee. And it just went down into all the tax scenarios, and not all of that was presented back to council.
Sure.
I think when you feel like you need to see all of it, I'm not sure why go to ad hoc. Council President Martz.
I like Paul's suggestion. I think the spirit of it is just that if we already know that there's going to be a lot of work on July 23rd, if 2 or 3 or however, something less than 4, people are willing to get together and take some afternoons and try to hit this a little bit and make it such that when we get to the July 23rd, it's in any way more ready for the 7 to look at, then I like that idea. And I personally, I'm fine with if I get to hear a presentation from the city twice, then that's twice as nice.
Okay, where are we going? Do we want an ad hoc prior to a work session in June? And do we have volunteers for the ad hoc? Councilmember A, Councilmember Hunt.
Not volunteering.
Volunteers for the ad hoc. Put his hand up. There.
I was just going to endorse the notion of having an ad hoc to do the early analysis of both the current rules of procedure and then the new ideas as they start to crystallize by the administration, and then bring that forward to a committee work session in the end of July, and that we don't take action on these rules until such time as we have all of them in place, and we just do it once.
So I'm not seeing a lot of disagreement with that. Who would like to be sitting on the ad hoc? Undersigned? You did put your hand up. Oh, gosh. Okay, big surprise. Council, so it's going to be between you two. Councilmember Hunt, Councilmember Winterstein, and then I have Ray and Martz. So.
Oh, no, you have 3? I'm
He
sorry.
did, he stuck his hand up.
And did you have your hand
He
up,
really
Paul?
did.
Okay, then I'm fine.
Are you good? Okay.
those 3 are
We have
great.
our ad hoc. So just to make sure, I want Tina to give a chance to ask questions to make sure she understands the dates, the expectations, and all of that. You had another question?
I just had a comment on the value of recording. So I think I think firstly that there is value. I watch other committee meetings, for example. So there's a different sort of value for people, I think, watching the meetings than necessarily if we're all 7 in the conversation together. So I am interested in how we best can communicate the information from the ad hoc, specifically because especially because we're going to be doing more ad hoc, so we're going to need to have those conversations, that information conveyed to the larger body efficiently more often than in our current structure. And then also the recordings are, I think, also useful for the public and for transparency. So to the extent that we can do that, I think it's important. And again, moving more to ad hoc, I think the extent that we can convey not only amongst ourselves, but to the public what we're talking about, it's just that much more important.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Tina, did you have any questions on what you've heard in terms of timing, expectations?
I think the clerk's office would like to move quickly with ad hoc group and scheduling some dates and times that work
In the next
well.
couple of weeks on the ad hoc?
I think we would track the document through red line version and add comments to help convey our progress.
Be great.
Yeah.
Anything else? Since this had a motion with the original AB, Tisha, what would the process be this evening?
I would really appreciate if someone would make a motion to the effect of the discussion you just had about forming an ad hoc group to further discuss the rules and list those who would be appointed to the committee.
That sounds great. Does somebody want to make that off the top of their head or take a few? Okay, Council President Martz.
I will take a stab at it.
Okay.
I would move that the city create an ad hoc committee to review the document, the Rules and Procedures document comprised of council members Hunt, Ray, and Winterstein, and that they report no later than July 23rd when we take up this agenda bill again.
Prior to July 23rd.
Prior to July 23rd.
Is a second?
Second.
Okay. It was moved to create an ad hoc committee to review the council rules and rules of procedure with council members Winterstein, Hunt, and Ray reporting back to the full council prior to July 30, what's the date? July
23rd.
23rd.
And that the council take up this agenda bill again on the 23rd.
Okay.
July 23rd.
Consider it on July 23rd. Maybe on July 23rd. Okay. I can read it one more time unless it's clear. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item under business this evening is good of the order. Do council members have anything? Councilmember Winterstein, good of the order?
I did, and she was here earlier this evening and left last meeting. I made a math mistake, and I had someone in the audience step forward and correct me, and I wanted to give Susan Forbes credit for that. And 1/5 of 1% of 250 is $5, not $50. So thanks for the correction, Susan.
Awesome. Anything else for good of the order? I have some information on some upcoming council meetings. June 3rd, regular council meeting, 7 p.m. in council chambers. The potential agenda items are a Hall of Fame recognition and reception, Hall of Fame recognition at the council meeting, and a reception that will be held in Chambers lobby at 6:30 p.m. We will have an end of legislative session report and a public hearing on the Polygon Northwest Affordable Housing Development Agreement Amendment. June 10th, council work session scheduled for 6:30 p.m. in Chambers. The potential agenda items are branding and wayfinding, the regional agenda, and the 2020 to 2025 capital improvement plan, and the City Hall facilities long-range planning. Anything else? There will be no executive session this evening, and we are adjourned at 9:05.